Hello everybody, this is Essay 2 for our test on Thursday, and this question is asking you to analyze the extent to which the Spanish-American War was a turning point in American foreign policy. And the key thesis here should revolve around the fact that before the Spanish-American War, America was a developing nation in foreign policy, whereas after the Spanish-American War, we became far more of a greater world power. Now, analyze the extent. To what extent, that's where you have to decide what you'd like to prove in your essay. So to begin this, we need to go over reasons for imperialism, and actually we should probably define imperialism. Imperialism is when a stronger country takes over a weaker area of land. And what I would love for everybody to remember is that the late 1800s is the Gilded Age in American history. And this is when the rise of big business is contributing to many changes. The laissez-faire attitude of the government toward business allowed the economic development to occur. And yes, I know that many of you know that it was leading to a gap between the rich and the poor. But for this essay, we really want to focus on the desire for new markets to sell goods and to acquire raw materials from this new area. So that, in addition to world power, helping other people in lesser developed areas, and the desire to keep up with the European powers who were also being imperialistic, is one of the key reasons why the U.S. used this policy. Now, the two areas that we acquired, well, one before and one during the Spanish-American War, are Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska did not become ours until 1867. And in 1867, we bought it from Russia for $7.2 million. Our Secretary of State was William Seward, and this was referred to as Seward's Folly because many critics thought it was just a great giant icebox. In fact, it turned out that it had oil and gold on the island. As far as Hawaii, in the 1890s, the queen, right here, Liliuokalani, was... Oh, I'm not going to have room for this. I don't know if it's going to go, you can't see that. But Queen Liliuokalani was overthrown by a group of American farm workers who were on the island. Whether or not the U.S. military was involved is debatable, but at the time that it was overthrown, the president of Hawaii was Sanford Dole. And the goal of the people in Hawaii was to be annexed by the United States, but President Cleveland refused to do so. So it wasn't until President McKinley was in office that the U.S. did annex Hawaii, I believe in 1899, but I could be off by a year. And this image is for all you people who can't deal with America not having 50 states. This is a historical picture of all the different flags we've had. So just be prepared when we have 51 or 52, although for the record, I want to be sure everybody knows that I know we have 50 states right now. Okay, so now we go to the Spanish-American War. And the fighting in the Spanish-American War took place in Cuba and the Philippines, but most of the problems originated in Cuba. So, cause number one is humanitarianism. We would like to help the Cubans because they are being mistreated very badly by the Spanish. And the general, Valeriano Weyler, was even referred to by the Cubans as Butcher Weyler. So there's no question that one of the causes is we're trying to help the Cubans against their oppressive rule. Now, the second cause are our economic interests. We did have $50 million invested in Cuba, and specifically in the sugarcane fields. And in order to get people's attention, some Cubans were burning those fields down, hopefully to wake up the rest of the world. Now, the third cause is yellow journalism. And this is when men like Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst were exaggerating how bad the atrocities were in order to sell newspapers and raise the ire of Americans. So when we heard these stories, it made people put a little bit more pressure on the government to go to war. The fourth cause is the Delaunay letter. And this is a letter that the Spanish minister wrote mocking President McKinley, calling him a weak politician. Even though some of you may know that our own Theodore Roosevelt was also a little bit belittling on William McKinley, saying that he had the backbone of a chocolate eclair. And then the spark of the war is the sinking of the Maine. This was a U.S. battleship that was blown up off the coast of Havana, Cuba. 262 Americans on board were killed. And at the time, we used the slogan, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain." We blamed the Spanish for this act. It was not until much later, not until I think 1971, that the Navy concluded that it was really spontaneous combustion, that the Spanish did not do it. But these are your causes of the war. As far as the events of the war, please know that the battles were fought in Cuba and the Philippines, which was a Spanish possession. More people died from disease than they did from battle. Theodore Roosevelt fought with his Rough Riders. One of the key battles was the Battle of San Juan Hill. But this will be a quick victory for the United States. The Secretary of State, John Hay, referred to it as a splendid little war. Okay. By the way, at the end, I'll do a little quick outline. I realized I didn't do that. All right, so how is this a turning point? Well, I would argue that it was because America became a world power. We became far more interested in acquiring land throughout the globe. And I just want to make sure I see okay. And the treaty that ends the war is the Treaty of Paris in 1899. And what will the United States get? It will get Guam. I know some of you have your inside joke there, so I guess you get to laugh. Then, I still don't know what it is. Then we get Puerto Rico. And in something that doesn't completely make sense to me, we acquired the Philippines for $20 million. So this alone would make it a very simple story, but after this treaty, America extends its arm throughout the globe. And most of this will be done under President Theodore Roosevelt. And I think at this point, I'll actually go to the... sorry, struggling here. No, I don't want to go there. And I'm not going to start this video over. All right. Well, let's just start with China then. With China, and I do like this cartoon, we are going to issue the open door policy. And this is because all of these countries were trading in China, and the United States thought that it would be fair if everybody could trade with China. So the open door policy did just that, as you can see. However, the Chinese were not fond of the foreigners in their land, and they had a group that organized the Boxer Rebellion. These people were called the League of Harmonious Fists, and they unfortunately attacked any foreigner they could find on their land and led to the deaths of several Americans. Now we go, see there's the Treaty of Paris, which I already gave you, so I apologize for that, but I thought you might like this, 1896 versus 1900. It's showing how William McKinley, who ran for president both times, had made all positive changes according to him. Spanish rule in Cuba, now the Americans rule in Cuba. A run on the bank, there was a panic in 1893. Now a run to the bank because the economy is good. Gone Democratic before this, now they've gone Republican. But unfortunately for McKinley, he was assassinated in 1901 by Leon. How about this for a name? He was assassinated by Leon. This has nothing to do with that. Leon Czolgosz. And I think that's SZ. And Theodore Roosevelt, his vice president, will take over. And as Theodore Roosevelt takes over, there's going to be many greater changes in U.S. foreign policy. One of them will be in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico will officially become a commonwealth. And what that means is that it is a U.S. territory, and the citizens there have many of the protections that we have as Americans. You do not need a passport to go there. However, they are not permitted to vote for the president in the general election. They can vote for the president in the primaries for the nominees, but they also do not pay federal income taxes. And every so often they do polls in Puerto Rico. Here's one from 2012, what the people in Puerto Rico would prefer. And as you can see, it is a very close vote, but statehood is far behind the other two, being Commonwealth or being an independent nation. I take that back. I misread it. Statehood is not. Statehood is right here at 36%. Okay. Now we go to Teddy Roosevelt's policy. And his policy is called the Big Stick Policy, but it is also known as the Roosevelt Corollary. I am going to ask you in your introduction to possibly mention the Monroe Doctrine, which was in 1823. This is an addition to the Monroe Doctrine, or a logical outgrowth. That's what corollary means. And the goal of the Big Stick Policy is for the United States to exert its influence as the international police force. So his quote, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," refers to the fact that cops who carry nightclubs, we're going to be those cops throughout the world. So if a country tries to come into our hemisphere, we will be more forceful. And the first time that this was used or enforced was in the Dominican Republic. In the Dominican Republic, countries were trying to come in there to collect debt, and the U.S. used force to prevent that. All right. Now we go to the Philippines. And in the Philippines, this is the part that's frustrating to some. We fought side by side with this man, Emilio Aguinaldo, to get rid of the Spanish. But then when the war was over, we acquired the Philippines. So for 3 years, there was a revolution. The Filipinos fought against us, trying to break away. More people died in this battle. More people died than in the Spanish-American War. And we were victorious. And it was not until July 4th, 1946, that Philippines did receive its independence, which it obviously has today. All right, we also built the Panama Canal after the Spanish-American War, and this took some work as well because Panama, at first we were going to build it through Nicaragua, but Nicaragua was not a great location because the land was too thick, too wide, I should say. And there was a treaty called the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty where the British kind of relinquished the rights to build a canal throughout Central America. Now the purpose, I think, is very simple. Rather than having to go all the way around South America, we could just, I guess the red line should have been sufficient, we could just go through Central America and save considerable time. So Panama looked like the greatest location. The only problem is that Panama was controlled by Colombia. So we offered Colombia, I want to say $20 million to build the canal. But the Colombian Senate rejected it. So then the U.S. Encouraged and supported the Panamanian revolt. And after the Panamanians were victorious, we then began the building of the canal, which took about 10 years to do so. As you can see here, a picture of people doing it. But once it was done, it was a great achievement and had excellent economic opportunities for the United States. It was not until Jimmy Carter was president that he signed a treaty giving control of the canal back to the Panamanians, but that transition wouldn't take place until the year 2000. All right. Now continue with Teddy Roosevelt. He helped negotiate the Russo-Japanese War, which was a surprising victory for Japan. And he did win the Nobel Peace Prize for that effort. So you can see that he is making a name for himself on the world scene. But just to show off a little bit more, we had our new fleet of ships painted white and looking great and showed off. And we just sailed them around the globe, known as our Great White Fleet, just to send a message to the world that we are here and we are going to be a force to be reckoned with. All right, now this is something I'm not sure every class went over, and it would have been a nice debate. I may put this as a discussion question. But there's a series of cases that are called the Insular cases. These are Supreme Court cases. And the question was, now that the United States has all of this new territory, does the Constitution follow the flag? Meaning, since it is U.S. territory, are they entitled to all the same rights that American citizens are here? And the Supreme Court ruled in these cases that the full constitutional rights do not automatically extend to territories that the United States has acquired. It's a complicated ruling, of course, but it was frustrating to some of the people living in places like Puerto Rico, which thought that the Constitution should completely apply to them. And at this point, I also want you to be familiar with what happened with Cuba. I probably should have done this earlier, but Cuba is going to be forced to add the Platt Amendment to its new constitution. So even though we said before the declaration of war in the Teller Amendment that we were going to give Cuba full independence when the war was over, we didn't. In fact, the Platt Amendment places some restrictions on Cuba, such as that the island should not get involved in treaties without U.S. approval, that Cuba should not, I may have said that wrong, that Cuba should not get assigned with treaties without U.S. approval, Cuba should not get into any debt, some suggestions that I think Americans wish we listened to. But in addition, the U.S. received Guantanamo Bay, which is a military base on the island of Cuba that we still have today. So the transition for Cuba was not automatically independent right away. And this is what I want you guys to teach me how to do. Now that's a nice handout. That's a great handout. That just does everything nicely, pictures, organized. So somebody please show me how to do all this. All right, so now I should probably add a slide here, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that. No, I cannot. And now I don't know how to get back. All right, see if this works. As far as your organization for the essay, paragraph 1 should be your intro, as always, with your thesis statement. And you may want to begin with the 1823 Monroe Doctrine, since this is the foreign policy that begins U.S. foreign policy. The Monroe Doctrine states that European nations should stay out of the Western Hemisphere, but we don't really have the enforcement mechanism at that time. Some of you may even prefer to go all the way back to George Washington and his proclamation of neutrality, or his warnings in his farewell address. But that would be a good approach for the opening. And then just make sure your thesis addresses how much you believe this was a turning point. Then in paragraph 2, I think I would focus on reasons for imperialism. And at that time, you could even mention Alaska, since I really think that fits nicely into the discussion. If you think you can fit Hawaii in, you can. If you can't, that's understandable. Paragraph 3 will be the causes of the Spanish-American War. And I really didn't teach you a lot, but you can mention the events as well there quickly. Then paragraphs 4 and 5 probably, I did give you a lot on the results. This is challenging because so much is happening in a short period of time. So try to organize that, but I did give you all the information in the slides. And then paragraph 6, in your conclusion, I would probably do something about American foreign policy today. And of course, some of you support our efforts. Others think we should be more isolationist, but I think that would be a good way to conclude. So I hope this is helpful for you, and I will be working on the third one this evening, and then you'll have everything to study for. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you later.